They warned us that nothing good could come from touching the black iron core. Not through their words. No government, no general, no machine-fed bureaucracy has ever been that honest, but through what they didn't say. They quarantined it. Built walls, declared perimeters, erected mile-high lies about what went wrong in this place. And I knew, long before I set foot here, that all of it, the zone, the core, the silence about what it did, was just a reflection of people like me. The kind of men who think they can reshape the world with enough power. The kind of men who break everything they touch. I stand on the edge of what they call the quarantine zone, though zone is too neat a word for it. What I see isn't a place with boundaries, it's a scar, torn wide open and never closed. There's no border wall here anymore. No checkpoints, no fences, no floodlights. Just a long stretch of ground where the dirt looks scorched and the air feels like it's been left to rot in some invisible wound. Somewhere past that line is the core. Somewhere past that line is my answer, if I'm brave or stupid enough to take it. It's not fear, though it might look like it from the outside. No, what holds me here is a thought I've been trying to bury since the moment I decided to come. What if I'm wrong? What if this thing doesn't fix anything? What if it makes everything worse? It doesn't matter, I remind myself. I've already stepped too far to turn back. My guilt won't let me. The last war taught me that guilt doesn't leave scars. It hollows you out instead, burrowing into whatever's left of you until you can't tell if the person in your skin is even worth saving anymore. I've been hollow for years now, ever since the day I ordered a drone strike on a refugee convoy. I justified it at the time. Collateral damage, tactical necessity, all the buzzwords you spit out to keep the world from noticing you're a butcher in a uniform. But buzzwords don't quiet the screams, or erase the crater, or bring back the hundreds of innocents whose lives you wiped out for a strategic goal no one remembers. I didn't come here to fix myself. I came here because I don't know how else to live with what I've done. The quarantine zone isn't empty, but it might as well be. The survivors and scavengers on the outskirts gave me wide-eyed warnings as I approached, but their words were meant for themselves, not for me. "It's suicide," one of them muttered, staring into the fire like he wasn't talking to anyone in particular. He had the look of someone who'd been too far in and made it out by mistake. "You think you'll get to the core, but it gets to you first. Always does." He didn't need to convince me. I already know what waits for me in there. Not the details, not the specifics, but the principle of it. Power eats people alive. I've seen it in generals, in rulers, in men who climbed the ranks alongside me during the war. Give them something to control, an army, a city, a country, and they rot from the inside out. The core isn't any different, just bigger, quieter, crueler. I proceed, crossing the line where the air shifts. It's not something I can explain easily. It's not colder, not heavier, not suffused with any mystical energy. It's just different. Like stepping into a room that hasn't been opened in years, only to find it isn't empty. The first stretch of ground is uneventful. Ruins of the war scatter the area. Burnt-out tanks, broken drones, a field of craters that could have been artillery strikes. This place is a graveyard twice over. Once from the war that left it broken, and once from whatever the core did to it afterward. There's no movement, no sound, no animals, just silence, broken by the crunch of my boots. I stop beside a mangled exosuit buried in the dirt. It's a relic from the war, the kind I used to see deployed by frontline infantry. Brutish, overpowered, full of systems meant to kill you as efficiently as it killed your enemies if you didn't use it right. This one has been here a long time, its metal frame warped. I crouch to examine it, brushing against the distorted plating. The joints look melted, fused together by something far hotter than fire. I move on, cataloguing the details automatically. Years of military training never leave you, no matter how hard you try to scrape them off. You learn to assess, to measure, to calculate. How many clicks to the next marker? How long until the next enemy patrol? How much ammo left in the magazine? But out here, none of it matters. There are no markers, No patrols, no ammo counts. Just me and the zone. As I walk, I think about the core. What it must look like, what it must feel like. There are no accurate accounts, only rumors and speculation. Some say it's a machine left behind by an alien race. Others say it's not a machine at all, but something older, something alive. None of that matters to me. I don't need to understand it. I just need it to work. Ahead of me, the ground shifts slightly, the faintest ripple across the dirt. It's not the wind. There isn't any. And it's not my imagination. Something moved, just for a moment, just enough to remind me that this place isn't a graveyard. I feel a twinge of unease, but keep moving. The sun is setting now, though it doesn't set the way it should. The sky fractures slightly as the light fades, the horizon splitting into rough lines that don't align properly. I try not to look directly at it. I don't know how far I'll have to go to find the core. The quarantine zone isn't mapped anymore. It stopped obeying maps a long time ago. But I can feel it, even now, a pull somewhere deep in my chest. Maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe it's guilt, or fear, or hope. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Something I don't have words for. Either way, I keep walking. There's no turning back now. Not for someone like me. Not for someone who knows he's already crossed the point of no return. The terrain changes quickly. The initial stretch of scorched earth and ruined machinery fades into a desolate sprawl of skeletal trees and half-collapsed structures. Some of the buildings lean toward one another, as if they're conspiring against the laws of gravity. I make a point not to linger in their shadows too long. I keep moving, scanning the landscape for anything that doesn't belong, though in truth, nothing belongs here. I catch movement out of the corner of my eye, something darting between two crumbling walls. My hand moves to the railgun strapped to my pack. It's old tech, reliable only when it decides to be. I don't draw it yet, not until I'm sure. The movement comes again, slower this time. It's a man, stumbling out from behind the rubble. His clothes are in tatters, hanging off him like loose skin, and his face is drawn tight over his bones. He looks at me with sunken eyes, his mouth twitching like he's trying to form words, but can't remember how. I've seen his kind before. Scavengers who've been out here too long, caught somewhere between desperation and madness. They're dangerous in groups, less so alone, but I don't let my guard down. "Turn back," he croaks, his voice dry as sandpaper. I don't respond. He doesn't seem to expect me to. He just stares at me for a moment longer, then collapses onto his knees, clutching his head. His body trembles, his hands clawing at his scalp, and I think for a second he might be having a seizure. But then he starts screaming, short, broken gasps that reverberate in the stillness. I take a step back, my grip tightening on the railgun. His screams echo, bouncing off the ruins and carrying farther than they should. He doesn't look at me again, doesn't try to follow me as I retreat. Whatever's happening to him, I can't fix it. He's already lost and the zone doesn't give second chances. The first real threat comes hours later. The sun has dipped low, casting the land into an orange glow that feels more like the aftermath of an explosion than twilight. I've been moving steadily, navigating around collapsed highways and what looks like the remnants of an old train station, when I hear the crunch of gravel behind me. I freeze, my ears straining against the silence. The sound comes again, deliberate and measured. I turn slowly. There are 3 of them, stepping out from behind the wreckage of an old transport truck. Scavengers, though they look better fed than most. Their gear is mismatched but functional. Patchwork exosuits, repurposed military helmets, weapons scavenged from God knows where. The one in front, a wiry man with a crooked smile, raises his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, friend," he says, his tone oozing false friendliness. "No need for violence. Just thought we'd say hello, seeing as you're all alone out here." I don't respond. My eyes flick to the others, taking stock. One's carrying a rusted rifle, the other a modified plasma cutter that looks more like an industrial tool than a weapon. They're trying to flank me, moving slowly, their leader keeping my attention. "Not much of a talker, huh?" The leader continues, his smile widening. "That's fine. We can skip the pleasantries. Just hand over your gear and we'll let you walk away. Fair trade, don't you think?" My hand is on the railgun before he finishes the sentence. I don't bother with warnings. Scavengers like these don't leave witnesses. I fire a single shot, the weapon kicking against my shoulder with a force that rattles my teeth. The leader drops, a smoking hole punched clean through his chest. The other two hesitate for half a second, just long enough for me to dive behind a slab of broken concrete. A burst of plasma scorches the air where I'd been standing, and I roll to the side, gritting my teeth against the sharp pain in my ribs. They're disorganized, relying on brute force and panic to overwhelm me. I use it against them, staying low and moving fast, forcing them to expose themselves as they try to chase me down. A second shot from the railgun takes out the one with the plasma cutter, and the last man drops his rifle, his hands trembling as he backs away. "Please," he stammers, I didn't want—" I don't let him finish. The zone doesn't reward mercy, and I can't afford to leave him alive to alert others. The railgun hums softly as I power it down, the silence settling over me like a heavy blanket. I take a moment to catch my breath, checking my surroundings for any more scavengers. There's no one, just me and the bodies. I don't bother scavenging their gear. It's not worth the risk of tampering with their corrupted tech. Instead, I move on, my muscles aching and my nerves raw. The zone is watching, testing me, and I know it's only going to get worse from here. I can feel it now, the pull of the core deep in the pit of my stomach. It's not a physical sensation, but it's there, tugging at me like a thread being slowly unraveled. It's stronger than it was before, and I know I'm getting closer. The deeper I go, the more the zone feels like it's aware of me in a way that goes beyond mere observation. The terrain doesn't just shift, it reacts. Structures twist as if watching me pass, and the dirt underfoot seems more deliberate, laid out like it remembers the tracks of everyone who came before. Each step forward feels less like progress and more like surrender. Ahead, the path narrows into a bottleneck, funneled between two enormous slabs of what used to be part of a high-rise. The slabs lean toward each other, forming a warped archway that blocks out the burnt orange sky. I can't see what lies beyond, but I know it's not open ground. The core's pull feels sharper here, like a splinter under my skin, and I can't tell if it's leading me on or pulling me in. I approach the arch slowly, scanning its edges for traps or movement. The silence has returned, but this isn't the emptiness of the outer zone. This is the kind of silence that carries weight, like it's holding its breath. My grip on the railgun tightens as I step through the arch, the darkness swallowing me for a moment before the world opens up again on the other side. The first thing I notice is the heat. It radiates from the ground in waves, blurring the edges of the world. The ground beneath my boots feels unnervingly smooth, as if the dirt has been polished. I take another step, and the surface underfoot shifts, catching the light. It's not dirt. It's metal. The expanse ahead is massive, a basin of gleaming steel stretching farther than I can see. Rising from its center is a structure. It's part tower, part spire, part something else. Its surface ripples like liquid, constantly shifting between sharp edges and soft curves, as if it can't decide what it's supposed to be. I know what this is, even before the thought fully forms. I've reached the domain of a broken ruler. The broken rulers were once men like me, soldiers, scientists, scavengers, each one drawn to the core by ambition, desperation, or blind faith. They were the ones who reached it, touched it, tried to wield its power, only to be consumed by it. The core doesn't kill those who use it. That would be merciful. Instead, it twists them, merging their bodies and minds with the artifact's reality. They become something else, half human, half monstrosity, cursed with immortality and bound to the territory they've claimed. Their power is immense, but it comes at the cost of their sanity, leaving them as hollow echoes of who they once were, ruled by their obsessions and the core's influence. Every one of them is a warning, a reminder of what happens when the core's promises are taken at face value. And now I'm walking into one of their strongholds. The tower looms larger as I move closer, the heat intensifying with every step. My gear feels heavier now, the straps of my pack digging into my shoulders, and my breathing comes in shallow bursts. The railgun feels like a relic in my hands, a pitiful defense against whatever waits for me inside. The entrance is a rough gap in the tower's base, a gaping wound that oozes heat and light. As I step inside, the air shifts again, carrying with it a hum. Not a sound, but a vibration, like something alive is breathing just beneath the surface. But the interior is worse. It's a maze, but not the kind built with walls or corridors. The space warps around me, folding in on itself and stretching away. I see staircases that lead nowhere, doorways that open into empty space, and reflections of myself in surfaces that shouldn't be reflective. I see a younger version of me in the glass-like floor, his face unscarred and unburdened by war, but he vanishes when I blink. I move carefully, one step at a time, keeping my focus on the core's pull. It's stronger now, sharper, but there's something else beneath it, something watching. I turn a corner, and there he is. The ruler stands at the far end of the room, his figure barely human anymore. His body is a patchwork of flesh and metal. His left arm is an amalgamation of gears and pistons, clicking softly as he flexes his fingers, while his right is swollen and grotesque, the skin stretched over bulging veins. His face is the worst, half melted, half mechanical, his eyes glowing with a light that seems to burn from within. He doesn't move, doesn't speak. He just watches me with a look that's somewhere between curiosity and disdain, like a scientist observing an insect trapped under glass. "You made it farther than most," he says finally, his voice rasping like metal grinding against stone. "But you won't make it farther than me." I raise the railgun, but he doesn't react. If anything, he looks amused. "You're here for the core," he continues, stepping closer. "You think it'll save you, don't you? Fix all the broken pieces, rewrite your sins, that's what they all think." I don't answer. There's no point in explaining myself to him. He already knows. "You don't understand what it is," he says, his voice rising. "What it does. It doesn't fix anything. It takes, it breaks, it feeds, and when it's done, you'll be like me." He stops a few feet away, his glowing eyes boring into mine. "Do you want that? To become this? Because that's the only future you'll have if you touch it." His words cut through the noise in my head, forcing me to confront the possibility he's right. But then I remember the convoy, the craters, the faces of the people I killed. And I know I don't care. "I don't have a choice." The ruler laughs, a mechanical sound that echoes in the warped space around us. "They all say that," he murmurs, almost to himself. And then he moves. He's faster than I expect, his mechanical arm lashing out with a speed that belies its size. I dive to the side, the railgun firing, the shot grazing his shoulder and sending up a shower of sparks. The fight is brutal, chaotic. He moves like a predator, circling me, forcing me to react. His attacks are precise, but there's a wildness to them, a desperation that hints at something deeper. I manage to land a direct hit to his chest. The railgun's shot blasting through the mechanical plating and exposing raw flesh beneath. He staggers, but it's not enough. "You think you can kill me?" he snarls, his voice fractured. "I'm already dead." I charge forward, my blade a simple, brutal combat knife, finding the exposed flesh in his chest. He roars, a sound that shakes the walls around us, but I don't stop. I drive the blade deeper, twisting it until his body goes limp. He collapses, his glowing eyes dimming as he falls. The silence returns, oppressive and heavy, and I force myself to take a breath. The ruler's final words echo in my mind, a warning I can't ignore. "You'll be like me." I step over his body and move deeper into the tower. the core's presence pulling me forward like a tide. The corridor I follow twists and turns, the walls narrowing until they feel more like a throat than a hallway. The air grows thicker, hotter, and each breath feels like dragging steel wool through my lungs. My legs ache, my ribs throb from the earlier fight, and the pack on my back seems to have doubled in weight. I take another step, and the ground beneath me trembles. It's not an earthquake. The vibration is uneven, like a pulse struggling to find its rhythm. I pause, steadying myself against the wall, and the surface shifts under my hand. It's smooth and almost liquid, though it holds its shape. I pull my hand back, staring at the imprint my fingers left behind. The trembling stops as abruptly as it began, leaving only the sound of my own breath. I push forward, trying to focus on the core's pull. It's constant now, pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. It leads me deeper, down a sloping path that descends forever, the light dimming with each step. I've been walking for hours. My mind starts to wander, memories slipping through the cracks. The war, the convoy, the strike, each moment replaying itself in vivid detail. I see the fireball blooming in the distance, the shockwave flattening everything in its path. I hear the screams crackling through the comms, the sound cutting off too suddenly as the static takes over. I force myself to focus, shaking the memories loose. The path opens into a wider space, a room with a ceiling so high I can't see it. The floor is littered with wreckage, shards of metal, scraps of fabric, and bones that look far too large to be human. In the center of the room stands a figure. At first I think it's another scavenger, but as I approach I realize he's different. His clothes are ragged but clean, his skin pale and stretched tight over his frame. He's tall, impossibly so, and his eyes are dark, sunken pits that drink in the light. He doesn't react to my presence, his eyes fixed on the far wall. I follow his line of sight and see what's holding his attention. A mural carved into the surface of the wall, its details so intricate it looks like it's alive. The mural shifts as I watch. I see battles I fought in, faces I recognize, and places I've never been. The images bleed into one another, constantly rearranging, as though the wall is rewriting itself in real time. "What is this?" I ask. The man doesn't answer. He doesn't even blink. I step closer, reaching out to touch his shoulder, and he finally turns. His eyes lock onto mine, and I see something in them that makes my stomach twist. It's not anger or fear, it's understanding. "You shouldn't be here," he says, his voice low. "I don't have a choice," I reply. He studies me for a moment, then nods slowly. None of us do, not really. Before I can respond, he turns and walks away, disappearing into the shadows without another word. I stand there for a moment, staring at the mural, before tearing myself away and continuing down the path. I pass through another archway, and the darkness gives way to something worse. The room ahead stretches wide, its walls dominated by machines with angular structures that seem both functional and bizarrely ornate. Their surfaces glint under uneven lighting, intricate patterns winding across them, lines and grooves that suggest purpose, though their function is inscrutable. Thick, braided cables spill out like exposed nerves, sprawling across the floor and into a chasm at the center of the space. In the center of the room, a massive pit gapes open, its rim lined with shards of warped metal, as if the ground had been torn apart by something trying to escape. I edge closer, keeping my footing light, and peer into the abyss. The void below is absolute. No reflections, no depth I can measure, just an oppressive darkness that seems to drink in what little light remains. The core's pull is stronger here, almost unbearable. It feels like it's inside me now, wrapping around my ribs and dragging me forward. I grip the edge of the pit, my knuckles white, and force myself to breathe. I hear something behind me, a shuffle, the sound of metal scraping against stone. I turn, raising the railgun, and see a group of figures emerging from the shadows. They're forsaken. the remnants of those who ventured too far into the zone and paid the price for their ambition or desperation. Once scavengers, soldiers, or researchers, they are now something less than human and more than dead, victims of the core's influence, warped and reshaped by the environment it's corrupted. Their bodies bear the scars of their transformation, limbs stretched, skin hardened like cracked porcelain in some places and translucent in others. Their movements are mechanical, as if they've forgotten how to inhabit their own bodies, or worse, as if something else is moving them. The way they stagger forward makes my stomach tighten, not shambling like mindless creatures, but purposeful, like puppets being yanked by invisible strings. Their faces are slack, devoid of recognition or emotion, and their eyes flicker with a light that mirrors the cold rhythm of the cables winding through the room. They don't speak. They don't hesitate. They attack. I fire the railgun, the shot tearing through the first figure and sending it crashing to the ground. The others keep coming. I fall back, firing again and again, but they're faster than I expected. One of them reaches me, its fingers clawing at my chest, and I slam the butt of the railgun into its face. It crumples, but another takes its place. I reach for my blade, driving it into the neck of the nearest Forsaken. The fight is brutal, chaotic, and every move feels like it costs me a piece of myself. By the time it's over, the room is littered with bodies, and I'm gasping for breath. The core's pull is overwhelming now, dragging me toward the pit. I stagger forward and peer over the edge again. This time I see something. Far below in the darkness, a light flashes rhythmically, like a heartbeat. I've never felt smaller than I do now, standing at the edge of the pit. It seems to stretch beyond the physical, reaching into a realm deeper than the earth itself. I wipe the sweat from my face with a trembling hand. The fight with the Forsaken has left me drained, every muscle in my body begging for rest. But there's no time for that now. The core is close. I can feel it. I glance back at the bodies of the Forsaken, their twisted forms splayed across the floor. Their blank faces stare at nothing, and I wonder who they were before the zone took them. Soldiers, scavengers, desperate men like me. Or maybe they were people who thought they could tame the core, control it. Now they're empty husks, stripped of whatever made them human. I turn back to the pit. The cables running across the floor seem to converge here, tracing a path into the void. They're like veins, pumping something vital, or toxic, into whatever lies below. I descend slowly, following a narrow metal staircase that spirals into the darkness. The structure creaks under my weight, the sound amplified in the silence, and I grip the railing tightly, my knuckles whitening. The glow of the cables provides just enough light to see, casting shifting patterns on the walls that remind me of veins under translucent skin. The descent feels endless, the spiral narrowing as I go deeper. At the bottom, the staircase deposits me onto a platform suspended above an expanse of featureless black. The core is here. I know it without needing to see it. The pull is overwhelming now, a magnetic force dragging me forward, erasing all thought but the need to keep moving. My feet carry me across the platform, my hands gripping my railgun with such force that I can feel the ache in my fingers. And then I see it. The black iron core sits in the center of the chamber, suspended above a massive fractured dais that looks like it's been half melted and half destroyed by some unimaginable force. The core itself is smaller than I expected, no larger than a human head, its surface smooth and utterly black, as though it absorbs not just light, but the very concept of it. The air around it ripples, a distortion that warps the edges of the space around it, making it difficult to focus on its exact shape. It feels wrong to look at it, like I'm staring directly into a wound that was never meant to heal. The core hums with a power that I can't define, a presence that presses against my mind, pulling at memories and thoughts I didn't know I still carried. "You finally made it." The voice startles me, sharp and clear in the silence, and I spin toward its source, raising my weapon. A figure emerges from the shadows at the edge of the platform, moving with an unnerving grace. He's taller than me, his frame lean but powerful, and his face is disturbingly familiar. It's me. The man standing before me is older, his features lined and weathered, but there's no mistaking the resemblance. His eyes are dark and empty, and his expression is one of quiet amusement, as though he finds my presence here both inevitable and disappointing. "You've come all this way, risking everything, and you still don't understand," he says, his voice calm and measured. "The core isn't what you think it is." I don't lower the railgun. "And you do?" He smiles, though there's no warmth in it. "I've been where you are. I've felt what you feel. I thought I could control it, bend it to my will. But the core doesn't work like that. It doesn't obey. It doesn't grant wishes. It takes." "Then why are you still here?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. He steps closer, and I tighten my grip on the railgun, but he doesn't seem to care. "Because someone has to warn you. Someone has to tell you what you already know, but refuse to admit. The core doesn't fix things. It doesn't make anything better. It just reveals the truth. And the truth is you can't escape what you've done." I shake my head. "I can change it. I can make it right." His expression darkens. "You don't even know what right is anymore. You think erasing one moment will absolve you of the others. You think rewriting the past will make you whole. It won't. It'll break you. The core doesn't heal. It consumes. And when it's done, you won't recognize what's left of you." The words hit harder than I expect, and I feel a tremor of doubt worm its way into my resolve. But I push it down, stepping closer to the core. The pull is almost unbearable now, a force that feels like it's tearing me apart from the inside. "I don't care," I say, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I can't live with this. I have to try." The other me sighs, shaking his head slowly. "Then you're already lost." He steps aside, his figure dissolving into the shadows as though he was never there. I'm alone again, the core before me, its presence filling the chamber like a heartbeat. I take another step, and the world around me warps, the platform bending and twisting as the core's pull intensifies. My thoughts fracture, memories flooding my mind in chaotic bursts. The faces of the people I killed, the screams, the silence that followed. The core's pull is overwhelming now, an invisible tide dragging me forward. It's no longer a choice, it's an inevitability. My legs feel like they're moving on their own, every step a surrender, every breath weighted with something heavier than air. The platform beneath me ripples as though reacting to my intent, and the air thickens, clinging to my skin. The core looms ahead, perfect in its simplicity. A void that devours everything around it. Sound, light, reason. I stop a few feet away, the surface of the core reflecting nothing but its own existence. My hands are shaking, and for a second, I think about walking away. It's a fleeting thought, but it's there, a small, desperate flicker of the part of me that still believes in something other than this. But the flicker dies as quickly as it came. Walking away wouldn't erase the convoy. It wouldn't bring back the innocents I killed or undo the choices that led me here. It wouldn't change the blood on my hands or silence the ghosts in my head. I reach out, and as my fingers graze the core's surface, the world around me collapses. There's no heat, no sound, no sensation at first, just the sharp absence of everything. Then it floods in. Memories, not just mine but others, pouring into me like a dam breaking. I see the lives of those who touched the core before me, their triumphs, their failures, their inevitable descent into madness. I feel their pain, their regret, their hunger for power, and their despair as the core consumed them. I see the worlds they tried to shape, timelines twisted and shattered, and the chaos left in their wake. The images hit harder now, sharper, more vivid. I see the convoy again, the fire engulfing the vehicles, the screams of the dying. But this time, I don't just see it. I feel it. I'm there, watching it happen, hearing the commands I gave, the orders that sealed their fate. The weight of it crushes me, forcing me to my knees. The core pushes deeper, stripping away the lies I've told myself. the walls I've built to keep the guilt at bay. And then it shows me something else. The convoy never burns. The strike is never ordered. The faces of the civilians are filled with relief, not terror. The fire is replaced with calm, the smoke with clean, open skies. I watch myself in this new world, no longer haunted, no longer hollow. I see the life I could have lived, the man I could have been if only I'd made a different choice. It's beautiful, it's perfect, and it's a lie. The core doesn't give without taking. The moment stretches as I stand on the precipice, staring into the endless void of possibility. My younger self, unscarred and unburdened, stares back at me with hope and contempt. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The core's presence is all-encompassing now, and its intent is clear. Take it. Become it. I feel my fingers press against its surface. I don't know if I make the decision or if the core does, but the connection is irreversible. My body seizes as the core floods me with its power, my veins burning with something more than fire. It's like my very essence is being rewritten, stripped down and rebuilt atom by atom. The memories pour in faster now, a torrent of timelines and possibilities, each one louder, more chaotic than the last. My mind splinters, unable to hold the weight of it all, and I feel myself unraveling. I hear something in the distance. My voice. It's fractured, overlapping, as though 1,000 versions of me are speaking at once. The words are garbled, nonsensical, but they're full of rage, regret, and a strange, terrible clarity. The core isn't just consuming me, it's becoming me. The transformation is complete before I even realize it's begun. My body feels too large, too powerful, too alien. My hands are no longer hands, my flesh no longer flesh. I glance down and see metal and sinew fused together. My reflection stares back from the shifting surface of the platform, and it's barely recognizable. My face is stretched, distorted, my eyes glowing with a cold, unfeeling light. The man I was is gone, replaced by something infinite, something eternal. The core's voice echoes in my mind, a constant presence now. It doesn't speak in words, but in concepts, in truths that cut deeper than language. It shows me the zone, the world beyond it, the threads of time stretching in every direction. It shows me how fragile it all is, how easily it can be reshaped. The power is intoxicating, overwhelming, and I can already feel it corroding what's left of me. I step forward, or perhaps the core moves me, and the chamber shifts around me, bending to my will. The platform rises, the walls folding inward, and I see the zone in its entirety. It's mine now. Every blade of grass, every fractured building, every twisted creature. The pull I felt before has been replaced with something stronger, a bond that connects me to every corner of this desolate place. The memories of the others who came before me are still there, a chorus of voices clawing at the edges of my mind. But they're fading now, replaced by something darker, something heavier. I can feel the core's need to expand, to consume, and I know, without a doubt, that I am no longer separate from it. I am its vessel, its voice, its will. The zone begins to change as I watch, its fractured landscape shifting and reshaping itself under my influence. The chaos I once feared now feels like an extension of me, a canvas waiting to be painted. I could do anything now. Rewrite the past, reshape the future, destroy and rebuild the world 1,000 times over. But the cost is clear. The man I was is gone. His guilt and regret nothing more than echoes in the vastness of what I've become. I am the ruler now, the latest in an endless line of those who thought they could control the core. The thought brings no comfort, no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that I will remain here, bound to this place until someone else comes to take my place. And they will. They always do.